the Solo Coach Podcast.
Howdy folks, and welcome to the next episode of the Solo Coach Podcast. So today I'll be banging on about, you guessed it, coaching. This is a bit of a special episode that I wasn't planning. It's sort of a bonus episode based on a question I was asked by a relative who's listening to my podcast and said, do you know, David, I'd love you to do an episode just describing what is coaching for people who don't really know what coaching is and what it's all about. And I thought, great idea. Why not? So here goes my explanation of what coaching is, how it works, a few of the elements within coaching, what a typical session might be structured like, and a couple of little stories for you because I love listening to and sharing stories. So here goes. I'm going to start with the definition of what coaching is not. So I'm going to start with mentoring, which is a bit like sports coaching. So mentoring is typically kind of imparting wisdom from a place of knowing. For example, someone who's built a multi-million-dollar business, or several of them, might become a business mentor as they are imparting their knowledge of what has led to their success in business, and probably, no doubt, what they've learnt from all the mistakes they've made and all the failures they've had, but everything that's led them to the success that they've got today, they are transferring that knowledge over to you as a mentor, which is a little bit like a sports coach who might be coming from a position of having played for many, many years as an NBA baseball player, basketball player, or footballer, for example, as they are transferring all of their knowledge, skills, wisdom, experience from their mind to your mind, in a sense. So it's like a transfer of knowledge and skills. Coaching is also not therapy. So therapy such as cognitive behavioural therapy, internal family systems, IFS therapy, or hypnotherapy typically is focused on what's happened to you in the past, such as focusing on PTSD, and it's typically designed as a fix for a problem perhaps, or something that you're experiencing and you want to move past, and it's delivered by highly skilled, highly trained therapists who have undergone years of training and are experts in that specific area that you're looking for help with. That's therapy. So if therapy's looking back and therapy's sort of diagnosing and fixing a specific issue, therefore what's coaching? If it's not therapy, it's not mentoring. So my definition of humanistic, alternatively known as life coaching, is that it's a thinking partnership. It's like someone to bounce ideas off of. So it's non-directive, it's client-led, and it's future-focused. So non-directive means that as the coach, I won't come into the session with an agenda of this is what we need to do today and this is how we're going to do it. Like a teacher might come into a lesson with a lesson plan. It's quite the opposite. In fact, as the client, the onus is on you to come to the session with what you want to achieve and what outcome you want. And that might not be very clear at first, and that's okay. But the key, that the power is in your hands as the client. It's client-led. And we're going to be focusing predominantly on the future. So the position that you're in now, the present moment, where you want to get to in the future, and how you can go about getting there. As opposed to delving deeply into what's happened to you in the past and what's led to this day. That's not to say that we can't dive into the past experiences. I personally, as a client, I love talking about things that's happened to me in the past and making links, particularly when we're diagnosing repeating patterns and challenges that I'm experiencing, and where that might have stemmed from in my past, in my upbringing, or in my past job experiences or past relationships, etc. It can be really helpful to look back in order to be able to look forward with clarity. But that said, in coaching, predominantly, most of the time, we're going to be focusing on or looking to move and pivot and focus on what we can do now and what's going to affect the future, versus dwelling on the past. So that would be my definition of coaching: a thinking partnership in which you as the client are leading, and I, as the coach, I'm listening and I'm going where you want to go in the conversation. I'm coming along for the ride. So to make this a little more clear, I'd like to share with you a story from a business networking event I went to recently. I was stood in a circle with a business, I was going to say myself. I was stood with myself. I was present, and I was with a business consultant and a financial advisor. So it was a business consultant, a financial advisor, and myself. I said, right, so let's go around the circle. If, in theory, we all have a new client tomorrow, and that new client comes in with a cash flow issue. They're not getting enough money in through their business, and they're in dire straits because it's not working, and there's a serious cash flow issue. Not enough is coming in and more is going out, right? So I said to the business consultant, you go first. What would you do with this client? So for context, the business consultant was a guy with many, many years of experience in business. He'd been there, done that, seen it, kind of got the t-shirt many, many times before. And he was a gentleman with many more decades of work experience than I have. And he specialises in telling people what to do by his own definition, which is the opposite of what I do. So we'll start with him. He said, well, great question, Dave. What I would do with that client straight away is get some figures on paper of what are we looking at? How many clients have you got? How much are they paying? What other revenue sources have you got? What are your outgoings? What sort of quick wins can we get? What money are you owed? How can we get some money in the pot to get this cash flow system moving? What's your business plan? What's your short-term, mid-term, long-term business plan? Focusing on what's the short-term bit. What actions can we take now to solve this problem? So he was very much diagnosing what the issue is and focusing in on how can we move to actions as quickly as possible, but using all of his business experience and knowledge, and having been in this situation with many businesses before where it's sort of fight or flight. It's either, do something quickly and make a success of it, or do the wrong thing, or indeed do nothing and it will fail and it'll be gone. So it was action straight away. I then said to the financial advisor, what would you do? And he said, well, I have a fantastic system. It's a forecasting and revenue, sort of budgeting, planning application, and you feed in all your figures of what you've got saved, what you're earning. It's a planning for the future system. He said, I'd get the client, I'd get all their figures down. I'd sit with them in a consultation and we'd put it all into the system and see what it came out with, to see what position they're really in. Because often people have more money than they realise. They've got money locked away in places they weren't aware that they can actually access. Or, perhaps there's something we could do from a tax perspective. But it's like, how can we work the figures? How can we work the numbers, and what can we do with them to get this client the quickest, best outcome, and also look at their long-term financial planning and goals in the process. So again, it was all focused on the money. So then it came around to me, well, what would you do, David, with this client? Now, interestingly, I had this actual client earlier this week, a brand new client, and their first issue was cash flow. So I said, right, first question, how long has it been like this? Is there a time before cash flow was an issue? What's changed? between now and then? How does it feel? What's it like to be you? Paint me a picture at the moment. They were saying, God, I'm pulling my hair out. I'm getting pulled from pole to pole. I've got people ringing me. I've got my wife, my family needing money. I've got all of this pressure on me from every angle. So tell me more. How's that feel? What's that like? What's it like to live a life live the day in your shoes? And he said, it's a nightmare. It's doing my head in. I can't think clearly. I said, if I meet you in a year's time, we have coffee, and this problem has gone away completely, and in fact you've had the best year ever, what will it be like? How much would you be earning? What would that feel like? And he said, well, I'd be earning X amount. Everything would be better. My relationship with my wife would be better. My business, I'd be enjoying it again. The people I was working with, I'd be able to pay them on time, maybe even pay them a bonus. And I wouldn't feel so embarrassed at the state things are in. And I wouldn't be feeling like I want to quit and finish this job. So then the conversation with that client was about if the financial issue of not enough money coming in is kind of a high level issue, kind of above the waterline, if you think of an iceberg, what's going on below the waterline? Well, in fact, this guy was feeling pressure from every single angle, from his family, from his business, and then in the midst of feeling all this pressure, he was making a lot of mistakes, and feeling quite embarrassed, and kind of backing himself into a corner and digging himself a deeper and deeper and deeper hole, and couldn't see the wood for the trees. And in the process of him letting all of this out and sharing this with me, and we did some mind mapping on a whiteboard, he said several times, I'm starting to feel better for just sharing this. I'm no better off than I was an hour ago, but I'm starting to feel better for getting this off my chest. And it was in the last 5 minutes of the session that he had a realization that there's some clients that owe him money, that he hasn't chased them because he felt really uncomfortable doing so, and he felt ill-equipped, and he felt that from a place of complete desperation and panic, giving them a call would probably be the worst thing he could possibly do, because not only might they not pay him, they then might interpret him as a businessman that's not very competent, hasn't got very good handle on his finances, and maybe they wouldn't come back to him for return business, and he'd burn his bridges. But from a place of giving himself some compassion and kind of forgiving himself a little, allowing himself to get it all off his chest, he then felt better and more equipped to call these 3 different clients after our session. And he texted me a few hours later on to say, I called all 3 of them. 2 of them have paid me and 1 of them's paying me tomorrow. That solved the short-term cash flow issue. And it's not about, that's not changed his business and changed his life overnight. That was one single session that's allowed him to move forward by having a clearer vision, a clearer picture of what's going on for him in his mind at present. We've all been there when there's pressure on you from every single angle, and when it just feels like you're in an impossible situation and there's no way out, and there's only 2 options, which is put my head down and grind, or hit the emergency exit button and leave. And I don't like the sound of either of those options, because doing more and more and more of what I've currently been doing again and again and again is just going to lead to the same outcomes, because as Einstein says, if we do the same stuff and expect a different result, the same actions and a different result, that's the definition of insanity. If you do the same actions, you're going to get the same results, most likely. Unless you change your actions, kind of your input, your output's going to be the same. Very often in these situations, there's a third option, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. And when we're right in the thick of it and we can't see the wood for the trees, it can be incredibly difficult, if not nigh on impossible, to figure out what that third option is, which might be making a call to some clients that owe you money to get that money in, rather than just focusing on the problem of where's the next paycheck coming from, because I've got bills to pay and I can't get the money out. So what I will add is that typically, just an alternative example, very briefly, if you go to, the reason coaching works and works so well, if you speak to your friends, your family, your colleagues, your manager about a problem you're having, say it's a cash flow problem, or say it's a relationship issue, or an accommodation problem, you suddenly need to move out of your house, you're getting evicted as your house is getting sold, or you know, that kind of, the standard life issues that we all encounter inevitably at some point. If you speak to friends, family, kind of people that are in your inner circle, how long is it when you start speaking to them about that problem? How many minutes is it typically before they move into a solutions finding mode of, well, okay, right, I've heard enough about this problem, you've told me enough, you spoke about it for several minutes, I think what you need to do is this, this and this. For me, I'd say typically 5 minutes or less of me sharing a problem with a friend, with a manager, with someone who's not a coach, has no idea about coaching at all, someone who's just a well-meaning person, say a family member, who wants the best for you and has your best interests at heart. I'd say typically less than 5 minutes before they start saying, right, this is what you need to do. You need to do this, do that, and do the other. The problem is with that, I don't know about you, but I always feel quite disempowered by that. And sometimes even a little insulted. Like, do you really think I didn't think of that and I haven't thought of that already? It's not always the case. It could be that they can see it from a different perspective and they have a really good suggestion and you indeed haven't thought of it. But typically, in my experience, I have already thought of that. And if it was that easy, I would have already done it. And what I actually could do with is someone just listening to me and listening to understand rather than listening to respond. So as a coach myself, I'll listen to someone and just let my curiosity lead me in terms of just asking, can you tell me a little more about that? What does that feel like? What does that look like? How does that show up for you? And kind of roll with it and trust the process, because 9 times out of 10, just by leading with curiosity alone, they hear themselves and they're able to think things through and come to their own solution and their own answer without me suggesting or advising a single thing at all. So I'm not an advisor, I'm not a consultant, I'm not a mentor, and I'm not a therapist, but I am a coach, and I specialise in holding space and being entirely present for my client to just think things through and get that thing off their chest that's bothering them, from a space of having no investment in them, in their life, having no experience of what it's like to be them, but also being far enough out of their inner circle that I offer a completely impartial kind of external view of what's going on for them. I can really look from the outside into their systems and their life, their business, their relationships, because they've given me a glimpse, they've painted me this picture, and I can reflect that back to them. I heard this. When you said this came to mind for me. I was aware of, you've said this several times, you keep saying this phrase or this certain word. I noticed a few times there you were saying, I should do this, I should do that, I should do the other. How does that sound? What comes up for you when I say that? They say, oh Christ, I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself, aren't I? Yeah. And how does that feel? It feels a bit shit. What would you like to do instead? Put a bit less pressure on myself, cut myself some slack. How could you do that? Well, I could start by just doing the action and allowing myself to fail every now and again and accepting that it's a part of life. Okay, is that realistic? Yeah. Yeah, it is, yeah. And so on and so forth. At no point there did I advise or tell them what to do. It's the art of the question. So moving on from that very brief story that ended up being slightly less brief, what are some of the elements of a coaching relationship? So 4 elements, and I'm going to start with the discovery call. So typically when I have a lead for a new client, so if I have a referral from a client, I've got a friend who's really interested, Dave, they want to have a chat, or I've met someone at a business networking event or out and about in the streets at a coffee shop, say, that's interested in coaching, I'll say to them, okay, let's have a discovery call. This is often referred to by different coaches as a chemistry call or an initial consultation. But whatever you call it, in effect, it's a conversation. I like to conduct it over coffee because I love coffee. I think nothing goes better than coffee and conversation together. So it will be an opportunity to get to know them, to build rapport, and also to ask them what are the challenges they're facing. How long has it been like that? How would they rather it be instead? And would they be open to some help with that? And then if they are, creating that opportunity to them to work together, describing how I work, how coaching works, what I've talked about a little bit on this episode, how the process works and how it differs from other interventions like therapy. And then stating my prices and agreeing on when the first session is going to happen and how we'll meet, where we'll meet, and kind of closing that discovery call off on a handshake agreement of it's been lovely to meet you and maybe we'll meet again, or it's been lovely to meet you and I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday the 28th at 9 a.m. at my apartment. See you there, bright and early, depending on how the conversation goes. So that's the first element, which is the discovery call. The second element I want to talk about is the pre-coaching contracting. So typically at the beginning of the first session, I will have presented them via email with a contract for them to have a look at, and we'll go through it together in the first session. And it's typically just a 1-page document containing a few key elements such as logistics, when are we going to meet, how often are we going to meet, how long are the sessions going to last, how much does it cost, and what are the terms of payment, what are my bank details. It will also include a disclaimer, which is that in coaching sessions are completely private and confidential, only with the exception of if there's risk of harm to the coachee or other people outside of the coaching container, then I as a coach might need to pass that forward to a therapist or someone in a position of responsibility who can work to protect the client. The client's well-being and the safeguarding of the client is one of my utmost responsibilities and duties. It's a duty of care that I hold for my client. So if they are at risk of harm or someone else is at risk of harm, I might need to share that further. But that hasn't happened yet, as you can tell. So luckily I haven't had to do that, but it's just making the client very clear that is a thing to be aware of. And then finally, a coaching agreement features in my contract, which is about how I need the client to show up for the sessions and how I will show up for the sessions as the coach. So, and who has the responsibility to see the outcomes through and to follow the actions that we've agreed to, and which is of course the client's responsibility. I'm not here to help them do the thing that they want to do. I'm here to support them and to facilitate the conversation, to help them to find clarity of mind and thought, and to help bring them to some clear actions. But the responsibility to take those actions is on my client. And then there's a signature box at the bottom, signed by the coach, signed by the client, with dates. So that's a very broad description of my coaching contract. Of course, contracts do differ. Some coaches might have more or less in theirs. The fourth element is the coaching container, which, in a nutshell, is literally what it says on the tin. It is, the coaching container is where the coaching will take place. It's the physical place it takes place, how long it goes on, the sessions go on for, and sort of the medium it's conducted on, whether it's remotely via Zoom or Google Meet, other platforms are available, or whether it's in person. And it's where the conversation happens. It's a private and confidential space, and what happens within that coaching container stays within the coaching container. The final element I'd like to share is one of my own personal elements. Not every coach does it, but I choose to offer contact in between sessions. So that's not a continuation of the coaching session, as the coaching session goes on inside the coaching container. It happens within that allotted time that we've agreed to when we meet. But the contact in between sessions can be for if they've had some additional thoughts or ideas that they want to share, if they've had some wins that they'd like to share, if they're having a tough week and just want to get something off their chest. I made a couple of calls and didn't manage to get through, and just feeling a bit drained this week, a bit low. They might share that via WhatsApp, but in a voice note or in a written message. And 24, 48 hours later, I'll get back to them. Up to 48 hours later, I should say. I'll get back to them with sort of a message of support or a question. So it's quite short and brief, and you could say it's an extension of the coaching, but it's not the coaching itself. It's a way of keeping in touch and of them having the ability to contact me in between sessions, if there's a week or 2 weeks in between, to keep the ball rolling and keep building momentum, and maybe run something by me if they're suddenly feeling stuck because they've tried something that hasn't worked and they're feeling a bit deterred by that. Because my goal is for them to make progress and for them to move forward towards achieving their desired outcome. That actually segues me on quite nicely to the final session of this morning's episode, which is what's a typical coaching session structure? So a bit like a story, there's a beginning, a middle and an end. But it is client-led. So how does that work? It's client-led, but then there's a structure. Explain. Okay, here goes. So the beginning of a session might begin with a little catch-up. How are you? How's your week been? And kind of some rapport building. Like if you've got a serious business meeting with someone at work, but you might just spend the first 5 minutes of that meeting just having a little catch-up and getting settled and adjusted into the call or into the space, kind of settling down and literally taking a big deep breath and chewing the fat for a couple of minutes. And then we would start by typically defining an outcome. So I might ask, what would you like to achieve in today's session? Are you bringing a question to the session, a challenge, a problem? What would be, I run a 90-minute session, so by the end of the next 90 minutes, in 90 minutes time, what would be your ideal scenario or ideal position you'd like to be in by the end of the session? And they might say, well, there's this question that's knocking around my mind and I'm trying to think of a date, I'm trying to figure out when to make this decision or when I need to do this thing by, or I'm feeling stuck, or I'm feeling all this mental fog and I just want to clear the fog and I want to feel less stuck. Or it could be really specific. By the end of the session, I want to have an answer to this question, Dave. Okay, right, brilliant, we've got an outcome. So then, laying the foundations for the session, if we've got an outcome, if we know what we want to achieve, we can really move into what I call the middle session, kind of the filling of the sandwich. Let's get into it, let's go deep. Let's try and really delve into what's going on. What position are you in now? How's that feel? What obstacles are you encountering? So we've got the goal. We might be looking at the reality of where are we now? What's that like? What are some opportunities that are available to you? What are some of the different paths you could take? Are there any more? Are you sure? Are there any more? Even just one more? Try and flesh all those opportunities out, and then throughout that middle section, what I aim to do is move from thinking, brainstorming, and ideas mode into action. So to start to pivot from thinking about this, thinking about that, thinking about the other, into I think I'd quite like to do this, and I'd like to do that, and I'd like to do the other. And it's getting clearer now. Not very clear, and the dial moves across to, yeah, I'm getting clearer, I'm getting some clarity, this is making sense now. So move from thinking into action. It's one school of thought that in coaching, you're moving people from a position of fear to a position of love. But however you want to think of it, it's going from kind of the brainstorming, being in sort of, for myself as a client, like being all in my head, full of all these ideas, like, oh, I don't know what to do, to, yeah, that makes sense. I'm feeling a lot quieter now. All these voices chatting away in my mind have now moved from 50 voices telling me 50 different things to maybe one or two voices telling me a couple of things that are fairly well aligned. And I feel clearer, I feel better, I feel more equipped to go away and follow these actions. And I will say as a coach, there's a huge element here of trusting the process. They might come in with a question of, I want a date when I can do this. And I have no idea if by the end of the session we're going to have that date. And I have no idea, even less of an idea of what that date's going to be, because only they know. But the process is to help them to figure it out. Everything is figure-outable if you give it enough time. I'm a great believer of that. The mind with the problem is most likely the mind with the solution as well. They just don't know it yet. So it's about uncovering that solution. It's about getting clearer. Because it might be that the question they come in with isn't really the question at all. This often happens. The question might be about money, but then in reality, it might end up being a relationships challenge that they're going through. And they've got this assumption that achieving more money and more income will fix everything, including their relationship challenge. And from my experience, that's very seldom the case. And by focusing on the relationship issue, we may end up positively changing the money issue. But when we really get into what that real problem is, we delve below the surface. So we're not just fixing symptoms, but we're working on the root cause. It might be a little more difficult, it might take a bit more time, but if we can finally get past it and figure out what it is, then with a higher probability of achieving our desired outcome, and many of them, rather than just achieving more money. Because that might not have been, it might be what they need to do, but it might not be the only thing they need to do, or it might be a false solution that's not actually going to fix the real problem here. So trusting the process is really important. And then the final part of the session, the beginning, the middle and the end, is to start to bring the session to a close, to agree on what those actions are, get really specific. Are they realistic? Are they achievable? When are you going to have done them by? And when and how are we going to review them? What timescale shall we put on them? Are we going to review them in the next session or the session after? And when is our next session going to be? Let's agree the time and the date. Let's get it in the calendar. And then let's bring the session completely to a close. And maybe if there's a couple minutes left, just again resume that social chat from the beginning of the session. So what does the rest of your day look like? What have you got on? Where are you off to this weekend? Oh, yeah, I'm off. We're off here. You're off there. Fantastic. Enjoy and see you in the next session. So you're ending on that rapport building, that social aspect that you started on, having closed the coaching session. So that was everything I wanted to share today in terms of what is coaching. And then I thought I'd end by just sharing a final client success story, which I love to share in business networking events. So here goes. I had a client that I've been working with for about 6 months on a weekly basis. And when we started, this client ran a business and they were running it all themselves. They were spinning all of the different plays. They were being pulled from pillar to post, working all the hours under the sun. They were the true definition of a one-man band, and that music never stopped. The problem was, in this process, they weren't earning as much money as they'd like for all the hours they were working under the sun. Their own clients were saying, you're not charging us enough for this product. What you're delivering to us is worth way more than you're charging. Their own clients were saying that. They knew that they wanted to take on more business. They've got expansion and growth opportunities, and they've got new clients just waiting to sign up, but they've got no capacity because they'd reached that point where they were doing as much as they possibly could themselves, but they just had no time. They'd barely had enough time to serve their existing clients, never mind a bunch of new ones. So they'd reached that sort of that cap, that glass ceiling of what they could achieve themselves. And then in the process, because they were working so many hours, they weren't spending much time with their family. Their relationships with their family weren't as great as they could be. And they noticed that they were neglecting their own health. They weren't as fit and healthy as they could be. They were eating a lot of fast food, drinking a bit too much alcohol, and generally just burning the candle at both ends and feeling pressure from all angles, and all the different areas of their life were sort of suffering because this business was all consuming like a vampire, sucking the life out of them, and in the process they were starting to lose the joy and the passion for what they did. We spoke a lot over several weeks about what it used to be like, what it was once like, and how it's got to this point, and how they'd like it to be instead. And it turns out this person had a very strong vision, felt very called to do this work, had a really strong purpose behind what they were doing, and had a really strong why as to why they were doing it. But at the same time, the harder they worked, the further away their vision for their dream future, their dream reality got. As it just felt impossible that they'd ever achieve that amount of money. It felt impossible that they'd ever have enough time to spend with their family and their friends in the way that they wanted to. And it just felt like the longer it goes on for, the more it just becomes a pipe dream. And maybe the closer they get to giving up and just getting another job. Just going and working for someone else and kind of throwing in the towel and saying, well, I tried, I gave it a go. 6 months later, through lots of deep conversations and introspection in sessions and lots of notes and communication between sessions, this person is in a completely different space. So this person now employs 3 freelancers in their business on a pay-as-you-go basis, but has them doing regular work for him on a kind of weekly or bi-weekly basis. As a result, the quality of his output, the quality of the product that he provides, has increased, in his opinion, tenfold. As he's got now 4 people working on the project, 4 experts rather than just himself. So the quality of the product's increased significantly. He decided one day to triple his prices, as advised by one of his own clients. Said, you need to be charging me at least 3 times more. So he said to them, so how about it then? Do you want to pay me 3 times more? And they said, yes. Yes. He invoiced them, they paid it. So from that day, he said, right, I'm going to charge not all of my existing clients, but some of my existing clients, and then my new clients, I'm going to charge them 3 times as much. Because some of his existing clients couldn't afford to pay that. But it's his decision. It's his business at the end of the day. So he's charging more money, but he's delivering a much better product. So the business is going well. And he told me, I've never seen as much money as this before coming in. Even after I've paid all these freelancers, I've never seen this level of income before. This is completely new. This is alien to me. I almost don't know what to do with it, how to manage it. But the very best bit for me, my favourite part of it, is that he now carves out dedicated family time 3 times a week. And as a result, his relationship with his family and his partner is much improved, drastically improved, as a result of the positive changes he's made in his business, and also of the fact that he started going for regular exercise and doing what he loves, riding his bike, hiking up mountains around North Yorkshire, and he is thriving because of the conversations we've had and the actions that he's consistently taken after every session. Every time the actions we've agreed to take, he's either taken them all and done them and finished them, completed them by the next session, or he's completed all except for 1 or 2, but then he's doubled down on the following week to make sure those actions were all completed. I've held him to account, but he's also held himself very accountable because he's been invested in the process, and he paid me a significant sum of money that for him was very significant at the beginning because he wasn't making that much money. But in paying me the money, he's committed to himself as a coaching client, and he's committed to the coaching process. And we are making huge steps of progress, and we often say we've only scratched the surface of what we can achieve by continuing to work in this way together. And that was all made possible by coaching. And I knew nothing about his business and what he does for a living. It's not my area of expertise, and I've never once advised him what he should do and what he needs to do. But all I've done over that 6 months is listen to him, reflect to him what he said back to me, get curious, ask him to explain how he's feeling, what it's like, how it could be instead. We've fleshed out loads of ideas together. We've brainstormed. We've done so many activities together, but at no point have I told him what to do. At no point have I advised him this is what you ought to be doing. He's advised me, and he's told me what he's going to do and how he's going to do it and when he's going to do it by, and then he's gone and done it. And that is the coaching process, and that's what I love doing, and I love being a coaching client, as it's what my coach does with me. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I've been David Garwood, the Solo Coach Podcast. I'll be back again soon. Thank you for listening.
The Solo Coach Podcast.